Assalamualaikum, we are from Group 7 and today we will be presenting the inclusivity of design in public buildings, specifically in local mosques. There are four members in our group, which is Ahmad Arif Fakri, Chewan Zuhilmi, Farisha Adliana, and Nurdani Erdina.
Now let's begin with our abstract. As you can see from the map on the right, this study evaluates the inclusivity of four selected local masks. Our main focus was to look at accessibility for persons with disabilities or PWD. To do this, we conducted direct site observation at each location. We guided our assessment using a professional standard, the Malaysian Standard MS 1184 2014 checklist. Our findings show a difference between the location. First, Masjid Anwar UTP achieved the highest level of accessibility, meaning it matches universal design principles very well. On the other hand, Masjid As-Siddiq had the lowest level of accessibility. This was mainly due to limited barrier-free access and a lack of proper facilities for PWD. Overall, we found that all the masks do provide basic features. For example, they all have ramp, parking spaces, and ablution facilities. However, further improvement are still needed to make sure every user can access these spaces safely and independently. In the end, our study offers practical recommendations to help design more inclusive masks and public buildings across Malaysia.
Okay, next I will present about the research problems and research intent. Okay, so based on our research, we found out that there are many research regarding the inclusive design, but most of them actually only discuss about the general principle. However, there are still limited research on how this principle actually apply in our local mosque. So in this context, the local mosque is the mosque around Syed Iskandar. So because of this, we don't really know whether the local mosques are actually accessible or inclusive enough for people with disabilities. So for the aim of our research, we aim to evaluate the accessibility of our local mosques by observing their physical layout, accessibility facilities, and also users' experience. So from our findings, we identify the barriers that users face, and also we try to propose design improvements to help create more inclusive and welcoming mosque experience to all users.
For literature review, we are focusing on four main keywords, which is PWD, accessibility, MOS, and inclusivity. For PWD, the accessibility should be addressed physical, sensory, hearing, and cognitive disability to ensure equal access for all users, especially the PWD users, at public spaces such as MOS. While for MOS, we found that most MOS provide basic accessibility facilities, but many still have lacking in terms of universal design principles, where it didn't cater to its users, which is PWD. Then for accessibility, common improvement needed to be included, such as accessible parking, ramps, handrails, signage, circulation routes, and ablution facilities. And lastly, for inclusivity, the universal design encouraged equal participation, safety, independence, and a barrier-free environment for all users. For literature review, we are focusing on four main keywords, which is PWD, accessibility, MOS, and inclusivity. For PWD, the accessibility should be addressed physical, sensory, hearing, and cognitive disability to ensure equal access for all users, especially the PWD users, at public spaces such as MOS. While for MOS, we found that most MOS provide basic accessibility facilities, but many still have lacking in terms of universal design principles, where it didn't cater to its users, which is PWD.
For the research methodology, this study focused on evaluating local mosque design based on universal accessibility standard. The main objective is to identify existing accessibility issues and propose suitable inclusive design improvement. In terms of scope, the research was conducted through empirical and observation fieldwork at selected community mosques in Seri Iskandar Perak. The research framework is divided into three main phases. Phase 1 is the preliminary phase, which involve background study and identifying the research focus. Phase 2 is data collection, where site observation will carry out at the selected mosque. Phase 3 is data analysis, where the collected findings were evaluated to understand the level of accessibility performance. Overall, this methodology helps support the research finding and ensure the recommendations are based on real site observation. The research framework is divided into three main phases. Phase 1 is the preliminary phase, which involve background study and identifying the research focus. Phase 2 is data collection, where site observation will carry out at the selected mosque. Phase 3 is data analysis, where the collected findings were evaluated to understand the level of accessibility performance. Overall, this methodology helps support the
So, phase 1 preliminary phase. The preliminary phase focused on reviewing universal design principles, accessibility standards, and previous studies on inclusive religious building. This stage established the research foundation and defines the objective to identify existing accessibility features and barriers in mass environment, evaluate compliance with universal design principles, and propose recommendation to improve accessibility and inclusivity for persons with disabilities (PWD). The finding from this phase guide the subsequent data collection process. To begin, This preliminary phase focuses on three key areas. First, universal design principle. Second, accessibility standards. And third, previous studies on inclusive religious building. During this reading is very important because this stage establishes our research foundation. This stage also defines our three main objectives, which is our first objective is to identify existing accessibility features and barriers in mass environment. We want to see what is already working and what is still standing in the way. Our second objective is to evaluate compliance with universal design principle. This means checking if the mass actually follow this design rule. And our third objective is to propose recommendation to improve accessibility and inclusivity for persons with disabilities, or PWD. To sum it up, the finding we get from the phase will guide our subsequent data collection process. It tells us exactly what to look for when we collect our data next. Moving on to phase 2, data collection. Now that we had our research foundation, we went out into the field to gather our data. Our data collection phase involved direct site observation at selected masks in Seri Iskandar. We wanted to assess their accessibility and inclusivity firsthand. As you can see from the photos in the middle of the slide, we visited several locations. This included Masjid Bandar University, Masjid An-Nur UTP, Masjid Asidi, and the Pusat Islam at UiTM. During our site visits, our observation focused on key aspects such as visual permeability, visibility, and usability. Specifically, we look closely at features like entrance, ramp, handrails, pathway, and ablution facilities. We also assess other key accessibility features built for persons with disabilities or PWD. To make sure we made an accurate evaluation of the mass environment, we recorded our data using 4 main methods, which you can see at the bottom, at right of the slide. First, we use observation checklists like the observation sheet A shown on the right slide to tick off standard requirement. Second, we took photograph to document the real world conditions. Third, we wrote down detailed field notes. And fourth, we took physical measurement of features like ramp slopes and pathway width. All of this was done to ensure a highly accurate and reliable evaluation of each mass environment. Now let's move on to phase 3, data analysis and findings. This section presents the finding from our qualitative study on the inclusivity of design in public building. Specifically, we look at local mass in Seri Iskandar, Perak. Our results are focused around the inclusivity of design in these public spaces. As you can see on the slide, we have 2/4 completed examples of our observation sheet. The sheet on the left shows our finding for the Pusat Islam UiTM Seri Iskandar, and the sheet on the right shows our finding for Masjid An-Nur UTP. The masjid that we have conduct our research is Masjid Asidi and Masjid Bandar University. For both locations, we evaluated features like ramp, handrails, and pathway using a 5-point Likert scale shown at the bottom. This scale goes from 1 for strongly disagree to 5 for strongly agree. By turning our field observation into these completed sheets, we were able to perform a statistical analysis from the data collected. This analysis clearly highlights which features are highly accessible and which areas still need improvement.
In conclusion, our findings show that the selected mosques already provide basic accessibility features. However, several improvements are still needed to fully achieve universal design principles. The main issue identified are the lack of sufficient handrails, inaccessible ablution facilities, and circulation space that can be challenging for elderly worshippers and persons with disabilities. To address these issues, we recommend installing additional handrails along ramps, staircase, and key circulation routes to improve safety. Secondly, ablution areas should be upgraded with grab bars, seatings, non-slip flooring, and accessible water fixture. Third, circulation route should be widened and kept free of obstruction to ensure smooth movement through the mosque. We also recommend conducting regular accessibility audit to maintain compliance with universal design standard. Finally, uh, Finally, involving elderly users and persons with disabilities in the design process will help create more inclusive and user-friendly mosques. Thank you.
So for our first data analysis, the table shows the accessibility features for PWD at selected mosques. So based on the graph that we can see here, in the PWD parking category, you can see that the strongest feature in every mosque because each mosque provided the parking that near to the ramp for people with disabilities to enter the mosque. For the signage category, we can see that the Masjid Asidi ranks the lowest because of their not clear use of signage, which can confuse the users in the mosque. And for the handrails, we can see that it is not consistently provided, especially at Masjid Bandar University and also Pusat Islam. For accessible ramps, we can see that it is available in every mosque, but the quality is different in each mosque that we observe. The slip resistant floor, Masjid An-Nur UTP did a very great job in providing a multi-sleep mat in every wet area. Overall evaluation, we can see that the best performing mosque is Masjid An-Nawawi, proven that they have the overall accessibility features that are better than most of these mosques. While the lowest performing mosque, the Siddiq, is proven to have the lowest overall accessibility features that are provided in their mosque.
In terms of the accessibility analysis, this graph compared the performance of the 4 selected mosques in Seri Iskandar based on 3 key criteria: barrier-free access, wayfinding system, and PWD-friendly emergency access. From the result, Pusat Islam UiTM achieved the best overall performance. It scored 4 for both barrier-free access and emergency accessibility, while recording the highest score of 5 in its wayfinding system. This indicates that visitors can move around the mosque more easily and safely. Masjid An-Nur UTP also demonstrates strong performance, consistency scoring 4 across all 3 criteria. This shows that its accessibility features are well balanced and effectively support different group of users. Meanwhile, Masjid Bandar University performed moderately well, although it scored 4 for barrier-free access and emergency access. Its wayfinding system received a score of 3. This suggests that clear signage and navigation could further improve the user experience. Finally, Masjid As-Siddiq recorded the lowest score among the 4 mosques. The findings indicate that improvements are needed in barrier-free access, wayfinding, and emergency accessibility to better accommodate elderly users and persons with disabilities. Overall, this comparison showed that while all 4 mosques have implemented basic accessibility features, there is still room for improvement to fully achieve universal design principle.
Next, let's look at our analysis of MAS, facilities and spatial accessibility. We visited and observed 4 MAS in Seri Iskandar, Masjid Bandar University, Masjid An-Nur UTP, Masjid As-Siddiq and Pusat Islam UiTM. We wanted to see how well these MAS support elderly worshippers and persons with disabilities. To do this, we focus on 5 main areas which you can see on our bar chart: smooth circulation between spaces, accessible ablution areas, sitting and resting areas, wheelchair-friendly door width, and accessible prayer halls. Looking at the data on the right side of the slide, here is what we found. First, for smooth circulation between spaces, Masjid An-Nur UTP has the highest score of 5, followed by Pusat Islam UiTM with 4, Masjid Bandar University with 3, and Masjid As-Siddiq with the lowest score of 2. Second, for accessible ablution areas, both Masjid An-Nur UTP and Pusat Islam UiTM scored the highest with a perfect 5, Masjid Bandar University scored 3, and Masjid As-Siddiq scored the lowest with 1. Third, for sitting and resting areas, 3 of our MAS, Masjid Bandar University, Masjid An-Nur UTP, and Pusat Islam UiTM all scored a perfect 5. Masjid As-Siddiq had the lowest score here with 3. Fourth, for wheelchair-friendly door width, Masjid An-Nur UTP scored a 5, Masjid Bandar University at Masjid As-Siddiq and Masjid As-Siddiq both scored 4, while Pusat Islam UiTM scored the lowest with 2. Lastly, for accessible prayer halls, both Masjid An-Nur UTP and Pusat Islam UiTM scored a 3, while Masjid Bandar University and Masjid As-Siddiq scored a 2. Overall, this finding shows us that most MAS do a good job for providing sitting and ablution areas. However, there are still gaps when it comes to prayer halls and wide doors. Masjid An-Nur UTP and Pusat Islam UiTM mesh universal design principle the best. On the other hand, Masjid As-Siddiq needs the most improvement to create a comfortable space for everyone. Next, let's look at our next set of observation.
For the results of inclusive designs at selected mosques, we evaluated through 3 inclusive design indicators, which is welcoming mosque environment, encourage social interaction, and encourage equal participation. While the key findings that we found while doing the analysis of the results, we found out that the Pusat Islam UiTM has the highest overall performance, where it scored 5 for social interaction and welcoming environment, and 3 for equal participation. The second goes to Masjid An-Nur UTP, where it has a strong implementation of inclusive design, where it scored 5 for welcoming environment and 4 for equal participation and social interaction. So for Masjid Bandar University, it has a consistent performance where it scored 4 all across the 3 criteria. And lastly, Masjid As-Siddiq has the lowest overall performance where it scored 3 for equal participation and 4 for social interaction and welcoming environment. So through this result, we found out that all selected mosques provide a welcoming and socially inclusive environment. However, the equal participation for PWD still remains as an area that needs improvement. So we also found out that the inclusive design enhanced the accessibility, inclusivity, and user experience for all worshippers. Lastly, for the results for the overall evaluation of inclusive mosque design, we did an evaluation through 3 criteria, which is safety and functionality, design inclusivity, and overall accessibility. While through this analysis, we found out that the highest overall performance is by Masjid An-Nur UTP, where it achieved the highest overall score, balancing accessibility and inclusiveness and safety, where it scored high for all the criteria. Next, for good accessibility and safety, we found out that Pusat Islam UiTM has performed well, but it also requires an improvement in design inclusiveness. While for the moderate performance, we found out that Masjid Bandar University showed a consistent scores, but need a better accessibility and functional design. And lastly, the lowest overall performance, which is Masjid As-Siddiq, recorded the lowest scores across all evaluation criteria, which shows that it lacks of safety and functionality, it lacks design inclusivity, and it lacks the overall accessibility for PWD users. And lastly, the universal design needed, where a greater implementation of accessibility, universal design, and user-centered planning is essential to create a safe and inclusive mosque environment for all users. So for the last part, conclusion, after through discussion and also the research analysis, we found few things that mainly focus in this research. First thing is the research gap, where the previous study mainly focused on the urban and state mosques, while for our study we focus on local mosques, and it shows that the accessibility has received a limited attention despite its growing community in its area. Second, for the overall finding, we found out that the Masjid Anwar UTP demonstrate the highest level of inclusive design with excellent accessibility, showing that it caters and it is a PWD friendly mosque. While second is Pusat Islam UiTM, which shows a great performance, while Masjid Bandar University and Masjid Al-Siddiq shows a quite low scores in overall performance, and it means that it needed an improvement in terms of accessibility design and inclusive design. Next is area for improvement. Although most mosques provide basic facilities, we found that the improvement are still needed as it lacks in terms of very free circulation, handrails, wayfinding system, equal participation, and universal design implementation. Lastly, for conclusion, the findings indicate a positive effort to improve the accessibility for PWD. However, it still needs further enhancement, such as the PWD requirements to create a safe, accessible, and fully inclusive mosque environment that accommodates users of all ages and abilities. So that's for the main parts of the conclusion. So here are the list of references that we use for the whole journey of our research. So that's all from us. Thank you.